I'm Jacob Courtwright, and this is The Locker Room. What is going on, everybody? Welcome into The Locker Room. We have a full show for you today. Before we can get started, you know what you have to do. I mean, you know. Follow The Locker Room on our social media. Stay up to date with everything we have going on. We have exclusive content exclusively to Instagram, exclusively to YouTube, to Facebook. So in order to get full access of The Locker Room at all times, join us on our social media. The Locker Room Podcast 615 on Instagram, The Locker Room Host Jacob on Facebook, TLR with Jacob on Twitter, and The Locker Room 22 on TikTok. This episode is brought to you by FNX Fitness. Go to fnxfit.com. That is fnxfit.com for all of your gym and health needs. If you're looking for a happier and healthier lifestyle, get the tools you need at fnxfit.com and use your promo code TLRHOST. That is TLRHOST for 15% off your first order. Today, we start off the podcast with a brand new segment. This segment is called Would You Rather NBA Playoff Edition. So it's pretty simple. Have you ever played the game Would You Rather? We're going to do it with NBA players. All right, here we go into the very first Would You Rather. Would you rather lose in the first round or lose in the NBA championship? Now, this one's tough because, of course, everybody wants to make the NBA championship. But it also comes with a lot more heartbreak than if you lose in the first round. So if I'm talking strictly for me, I would want to lose in the first round. Because that way, I get to go to Cabo a lot faster than everybody else, beat the foot traffic. And B, I wouldn't want to go through 4 rounds of the playoffs just to inevitably lose at the end. So see ya. Let me get out of there. Would you rather have Steph Curry take a 35-plus three-pointer to win the game in the playoffs, or Damian Lillard to have a 35-footer to win the game? Listen, fourth quarter, game on the line. I want Iguodala. No, I'm just joking. I want Dame Dollar. Damian Lillard is taking my 35-foot shot. Listen, Damian Lillard has 5 more game winners than Steph Curry in the playoffs. Listen, Steph Curry in the playoffs in 1 through 3 quarters is great. And the fourth quarter has never been spectacular. In buzzer beaters, gets even worse. I'm not saying Steph Curry's not the greatest shooter of all time, because he is. I'm also not saying that Steph Curry is not amazing in the playoffs, because he is. What I am saying is that Dame Dollar statistically has him beat in playoff game winners. Dame Dollar is cold-blooded in the playoffs, and I'm taking Dame Dollar every single time. Would you rather be a member of the Los Angeles Clippers and lose in the second round, or be a member of the Brooklyn Nets and lose in the second round? So if we're taking face value the matchups they have this year, the Brooklyn Nets have the excuse of, hey, this is our first time together. It's been a shortened season, a shortened offseason. Kyrie Irving's hurt. James Harden's hurt. I would definitely want to be a member of the Brooklyn Nets. If I'm going out in the second round, I want to go out with as many excuses in my back pocket as possible. Well, Kyrie Irving was hurt. Well, James Harden was hurt. Well, Kevin Durant was being double teamed. Well, we have a first-year head coach. Well, we have Blake Griffin, who's old and washed up. I just want to, LaMarcus Aldridge dipped on us. I want to be able to just load the shotgun and spray excuses at everybody coming near me. And listen, there's a lot of those excuses that are legitimate. Just like LeBron James would have won another championship in 2015 if Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love both didn't get hurt in the championship game, right? So I'm going out with as many excuses as possible. If you're the Los Angeles Clippers and you lose in the second round for the second straight year, after you guys claimed yourselves, this is my problem with the Clippers, by the way, people. They claim themselves to be the new kings of LA. They claim themselves to be better than the Los Angeles Lakers. They claim themselves to be the team of LA. And they already, they are the ones who made themselves the villains in the NBA. If you go out in the second round for the second straight year with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard on your team, with who everybody keeps saying this, and I don't understand why, the deepest bench in all of basketball. I don't believe that, but a lot of people say that it's the deepest bench in all of basketball with Tyronn Lue, a championship head coach. You now upgraded this year in your minds. You had Doc Rivers. He was garbage. Apparently, it was all his fault. It was all Montrez's fault. It was all sweet Lou Williams' fault. But you're about to go out to the Utah Jazz in the second round anyways. No, just saying here. But if you're the Los Angeles Clippers, you have no excuses. You have kinged yourselves the Kings of LA, or crowned yourselves, the Kings of LA. So it's not only your fault. It's not only my bad. It's pack up and move the team up to Seattle. Seattle needs a team. Listen, hell, Nashville needs a team. Go anywhere else, because at this point, if you lose in the second round, it's pathetic. I don't think anybody would want to be a member of the Los Angeles Clippers. Would you rather have Giannis Antetokounmpo win his first championship, or would you rather have Chris Paul win his first championship? I'm going with Chris Paul. Chris Paul has put in the work. Chris Paul seems to have gotten hurt at the worst times possible in his career. Whether it was with the Los Angeles Clippers when they had that stacked team with Barnes and DeAndre Jordan in his prime and Blake Griffin in his prime. When they had that team, Jamal Crawford was just getting buckets. When they had that team and Chris Paul got hurt, I've never felt so bad for one human being in my life. This guy just gets hurt at the worst moments possible. When he was with Houston and he got hurt, tore his hamstring or pulled his hamstring with James Harden, and they had the Golden State Warriors with Kevin Durant on their team down, and we're going to beat them, and we're going to send them home. Goodbye. We would never hear of the Golden State Warriors dynasty with Kevin Durant ever again. And he gets hurt. Chris Paul finally needs to catch a break. This is the year, if Chris Paul, mark my words, if Chris Paul leads the Phoenix Suns to an NBA championship this year, comes out of the West and leads them to an NBA championship, Chris Paul will not only be a first ballot Hall of Famer, he will be a top 5 point guard of all time. Now, I'm not here to debate that right now. That is a subject probably for next week because it's something I really want to talk about. But that's just my thoughts on it. But I want Chris Paul to walk away with a championship if there's ever going to be someone that's going to win it. Listen, Giannis is 26 years old, just turned 26 years old. This guy is not even to the prime of his career yet. They say prime's about 29. So this guy's not even in his prime yet. He's got plenty of years to win an NBA championship, and I think Giannis will do that. But if I had to make a choice, I want Chris Paul. Would you rather, and I actually asked this one on my Instagram this week, would you rather have Giannis Antetokounmpo have to make back-to-back free throws with 3 seconds left on the clock to win the game, or have Paul George be the primary ball handler for the last 3 minutes? I would put my money and faith on Giannis. Listen, Giannis is a god-awful free throw shooter. Giannis is what you would call a bad free throw shooter. Giannis is what you would call the worst free throw shooter that is a superstar. But I would still put my faith in Giannis to knock down 2 in a row to win a game than I would ever, and I mean ever, put my faith in playoff P. Old pandemic P, back at it, right? Here's the deal. Paul George has had one 30-point game in his last, I think it's 12, something like that, like last 12 playoff games. This dude went from a superstar to I don't even know what he went, to playoff P. Like, that's the best way to put it. He ain't playoff P, he's pandemic P. He went from a superstar, he went from somebody that everybody said is one of the top 10 best players in the NBA to somebody who is, and I don't know how people keep still putting him up there. He's one of the best defenders in the NBA. He's one of the best players in the NBA still. How? When? Where? Show me that clip of the playoffs where Paul George has been dominant in the last 6 years. I mean, I'll wait. Trust me, I'll wait. Send in the footage of when Paul George was valuable to a team for a consistent period of time. I'm not talking about for one game. Because game 3 against Utah, he was great. He had 30 points. He did what he should do every single night, especially against competition that can't really guard him. But name a time and place and year that Paul George has done that consistently for an entire series. Ever since he left Indiana. Indiana, Paul George was incredible. Ever since post-broken leg Paul George, I don't remember the last time we've seen him dominant in the playoffs or even a superstar in the playoffs. You don't have to score 30 to be a superstar. But you have to be effective enough to be called a superstar. I don't trust playoff P. I don't trust pandemic P whatsoever. Pandemic P has let me down time and time again. It seems like when I bet on him, when I need him to show up, he never does. So I am 100% putting my faith in Giannis. Would you rather have Donovan Mitchell as the leader of your franchise or Trae Young in the playoffs? Now, Trae Young had an incredible postseason this season. He became the new villain of New York. He had incredible 30-point performances. I told you last week, and I had actually one person message me. It's a pretty funny story. I had one person message me after I said on the show, I said, hey, listen, it's over, it's done. The fact that they were up 30 points and the 76ers came all the way back to almost win that game, in my mind, solidified that it's over. The 76ers are going to dominate the rest of the series, which, I mean, the series isn't over yet, but it seems like that's exactly what they're going to do. Seems like the 76ers are just going to continue to roll out 15 and 20-point games. But anyways, I had a gentleman write me, and he shall remain nameless, and I did block him. But I had to, guys. There was a whole lot more going on behind the scenes. But anyways, he wrote me and told me that I was the worst commentator he's ever heard, which it could be true. I mean, he could 100% be telling the truth there. I mean, I don't know how bad I am. I wait for you all to tell me. I look at my statistics from each episode, and that's how I know how bad or good I'm doing. But that I should never talk into a microphone again. So I want to thank Mr. Nameless because that was a great laugh. And also it was written at like 3:30 in the morning. I woke up because my phone started going off, and it was just this angry man who told me how much he hated me, which is always, I mean, it's always a lot of fun, all right? But Trae Young had his moments. He was fun. But Trae Young is not yet that superstar quality. Donovan Mitchell gets crapped on a whole lot, and I don't understand why. Because in the playoffs, he is an incredible performer. And the fact that he's been able to drop 45, he was able to drop 37, he's dropped 30 last game. Donovan Mitchell is on his way to superstar, and he's about to be in that category of top 15 players in the NBA. I don't know that he's there yet. There's a lot of guys. I honestly haven't looked at my list. I'm going to be honest here. I have not looked at my list as the top 15 players of the NBA. It's probably something we'll do next year, going into next season, I mean. But I would say that Donovan Mitchell would be a better vocal leader because he for sure is, and that I would trust Donovan Mitchell more to lead my franchise than I would Trae Young. Although I'm not saying Trae Young's not great because I thought he was great this year, and I love his growth. But then you look at Donovan Mitchell, he's about to lead the Utah Jazz past the Los Angeles Clippers and beat them in 5, so I'm going with Donovan Mitchell. Would you rather have old head coach for the Los Angeles Clippers, Doc Rivers, or new head coach Tyronn Lue coaching your team in the playoffs? I think both have their strengths, both are champions, and both have a lot to bring to the table when it comes to experience, when it comes to a good, solid resume. In my personal opinion, although I like Tyronn Lue a lot, I would go with Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers has the 76ers as the number one team in the East. He has the 76ers cruising through the playoffs right now. And he did the one thing that most people thought was impossible, which was get Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid on the same page. Before this season started, most people were saying that Ben Simmons has got to go. Ben Simmons has got to get traded at the trade deadline. He's got to get traded. They can't work together. Joel and Ben, for some reason, just don't gel. Well, Doc Rivers comes in and not only makes it gel, but makes it gel perfectly, leads them to the best record in the East, leads them to the number one seed, leads them to dominating the playoffs so far, and could lead them quite possibly to a championship if they continue on this upward stride. If the Nets are out of it, it's going to be a great series between the Bucks and the 76ers. I just don't know what's going to happen in that series. I don't know who's going to shoot the ball. I guess the biggest question for the Bucks and the 76ers is who can shoot the ball consistently, because we have not seen the Bucks do it. We have seen the 76ers do it at times, but then not at times. So I don't know which team is going to shoot consistently to win that matchup, but it's going to be very interesting. But I'm taking Doc Rivers, more experience. I like how he balances out the team. What I like about Tyronn Lue is that he seems to get through to guys. He seems to get them to play very hard and with a lot of pride. What I don't like is that we've never really seen Tyronn Lue have to coach a team without a superstar. So he coached, with LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard. He's always been paired with a guy that is a superstar and a championship caliber team. Now, I don't know that the Los Angeles Clippers are a championship caliber team because they've never proven it, but a lot of people think so. So therefore, with those question marks, I've got to go with Doc Rivers. Last would you rather question, would you rather listen to the Locker Room Podcast or any other sports podcast? I'm going with any other sports podcast. No, I'm just joking. The Locker Room Podcast, of course. And I wrote that just to plug my show. I'm sorry. I had to do it. Listen, sometimes when you have the microphone, maybe that guy was right. I am a piece of crap. But when you have a microphone, sometimes you just get to talk into it. And I didn't know how to end that segment. So I just thought I'd pat myself on the back. No, there it is. Would you rather segment is in the bag. I hope you enjoyed it. This is something I've enjoyed doing a lot. It's been fun being able to come up with all these questions. Let me know what you think. I actually might post these on my Instagram. So if you follow me on my Instagram, Locker Room Podcast 615, I think we're going to answer these over the next few days because this has been a lot of fun. So it has been proposed that in this week's meeting, the college football higher-ups are going to decide on whether to expand the college football playoffs or not. Please, for the love of all that is good in this world, expand the playoffs. We want more playoff teams. We want more playoff games. We want to see matchups that no one else would ever be able to make. We want to see UCF versus Alabama. The year that UCF claimed that they were the national champions because they went undefeated. Rightly so, they should have gotten the opportunity to go. I don't care about, strength of schedule. You know who says that? SEC fans who don't want their teams to take a chance on some other little school in the middle of nowhere that might actually be pretty damn good. Now, I'm not saying that strength of schedule does not matter, because it does. You have to have some sort of credible schedule in order for this to even be worth it. You can't have a team like, for instance, North Dakota State, a team that is very credible, has won a lot of in-conference championships, has gone undefeated several times. You can't bring them and go play Alabama in the national championship because, logistically it wouldn't work out, or conference-wise it wouldn't work out, but the point is that North Dakota State plays 7 high schools a year and 2 college teams. Great. That can't now match up with Alabama just because North Dakota State's great in their division. So what I'm trying to say is teams like UCF, who had an incredible season, who beat credibly ranked opponents several times throughout that year, the year that they went undefeated and claimed themselves as the national champions, they should have been given the opportunity to play Alabama in the national championship. The point that I'm trying to make is you need a full resume in order to be a part of the playoff conversation. There are several teams that have met a full resume criteria over the last few years that have never been given that opportunity because it was always given to the Alabamas, Oklahomas, the Clemsons, the Notre Dames, the Ohio States, right? It basically seems like it's the top 6 teams that always get in. That UCF team, and I only brought them up as an example, and of course I am exaggerating a little bit. They weren't beating the number 1 ranked team every single week. But that UCF team, in my opinion, had a credible schedule. They beat several ranked opponents. Their average win margin was 23.5 points. And they went undefeated, and they won their conference championship. That's a full criteria in order to make a college football playoff. They deserved that shot. Would they have won? Probably not. But they deserved that shot. So college needs to be better at paying attention to the full criteria, paying attention to the full resume. Listen, if Oregon next year, and the only reason I'm bringing up Oregon is A, they're the greatest team ever, but B, I was just looking at their schedule before this. Oregon plays Ohio State in week 2. Oregon also is going to play a USC team that will be ranked and is a very good team. Oregon will also play a Washington team that's very well respected. They will play an Oregon State team that their program's been blossoming over the last few years. If Oregon goes undefeated, wins their title, the Pac-12 title, should Oregon be held out because Oklahoma did the same, because Alabama did the same, because Clemson did the same, because whoever? Ohio State couldn't have done the same. But let's say Oregon doesn't play Ohio State. They play Notre Dame, and they beat Notre Dame, right? And Ohio State wins their division undefeated. If you have 6 undefeated teams, and they all have very credible strength of schedules, they all have very credible wins, they all have very credible ranked opponent wins. They have very credible point margins in those games. How can you hold out one or two of those teams? If Notre Dame goes undefeated, can you hold them out like they did last year? No, you can't. If Clemson goes undefeated, how can you hold them out? You can't. What about Bama? You can't. What about, and this is where it gets a little dodgy, what if a one-loss SEC team, like for instance maybe Texas A&M, who had a very good season, their losses were basically to Alabama, and that's about it because Alabama just is Alabama. We all know who they are. If your one loss is to Alabama and it's in whatever, the SEC championship game, but you've dominated the rest of the year, should you be held out of the playoffs? Well, let's look at it. Let's see what the other conferences have done. Do you take a one-loss Pac-12 championship over a runner-up SEC? Most likely. But let's have that conversation. I know I've already said this, but the point I'm trying to make is college football needs to start cracking down on the criteria for what constitutes a playoff team. Then we should expand. I say we like I'm a part of this damn thing. I'm just the obnoxious guy in the microphone. College football needs to expand to a larger playoff, 100%. But they need to make sure they have their criteria in line first. Strength of schedule, number 1. Strength of opponents, number 2. That would include opponents that were ranked. How high were they ranked? Stuff like that. If you beat the number 24 ranked team 4 times in a row because it's a different team, they just all happen to be teams that you played that year, that's pretty good. But if you beat a number 13, a number 9, a number 4, that's going to be better, if that makes sense. It's like, if you can imagine this in your mind, I'm at a whiteboard with red string just drawing the lines all over. If it doesn't make sense, you'll have to go back and listen to it. It makes sense coming out of my mouth, but I don't know if I'm being too much jumping around here. Strength of schedule has to matter, number 1. Strength of opponents and strength of ranked opponent wins has to matter. Point margins for victories has to matter. I'm telling you it does. If I have a Clemson team that only wins by 3 points and their average point margin wins is 5.4, or a Notre Dame team whose average point margins are 14.3, I'm going to pick that Alabama or that Notre Dame team over that Clemson team. As long as they both have the same strength of schedule. So I understand it is a very confusing topic, and it's very confusing how college football works. That's why they need to line this thing up. I'm not saying disband the committee because the committee usually does a pretty decent job. What I'm saying is the committee needs to all get onto the same page. The committee needs to say, hey, first and foremost, strength of schedule has to be the most important. You can't have an Alabama team, and listen, Alabama does get favored a little bit, but they bring a lot of money, a lot of views, I get it. But there was a season in the not too long ago past where Alabama had played 2 ranked opponents all year. They were dominating Missouris and the South Carolinas. Just because they're in the SEC does not mean that they are good. If they were, they would dominate bowl games outside of the SEC, and they're not. The SEC is very, very top-heavy. This isn't a bash on the SEC. I'm just trying to use them as an example. And what happened at the end of that season is they put Alabama at number 1. I believe the team behind them was Ohio State at number 2. I can't remember if this was the Ohio State year or the Clemson year because I was reading it before I started the podcast. But either way, this team had more credible wins. This team had more credible victories over higher ranked opponents than Alabama did at the time. And still, Alabama was ranked number 1, and either Clemson or Ohio State, I can't remember which one at the moment, was ranked number 2. So the committee has to do a better job at respecting the law of the resume. Once they do that, I believe we're going to see a lot of very fun matchups, and we are going to expand this playoff to 12 teams. And that is nothing but great for college football. Listen, college football, we talked about this it was last week. College football is one of the highest grossing sports in the entire world. College football is one of the most watched sports in the entire world. College football is one of the most enjoyed sports. If you look at literally the enjoyability of a sport, is one of the most enjoyed sports in all of the NFL, in all of the world. It's behind the NFL, actually. So, college football needs to make sure that they tighten their screws, they bolt everything down, so that way when they open it up to 12 teams, it does not become a crap show. And I know I kind of rambled on here about how the matchups work, and it probably is pretty confusing because I've already confused myself a little bit. But the point is, in order for this thing to be organized, in order for this thing to be respected, in order for 12 teams to work, they first need to respect the law of the resume. And I call it the law of the resume because the resume is the only thing we have to judge these teams on. Personal bias has to go out the window. Listen, I'm an Oregon fan, but if I'm sitting in a room and they expect me to speak and vote honestly, Oregon did not deserve to be in the top 4 last year. Would I have put Oregon as the number 1 team in the country if I'm speaking as a fan perspective? Absolutely. But if I have a seat at the table, I can't bring any emotion into it. It has to be simply off of the evidence that we have in front of us. And the only evidence that can be presented is the law of the resume. We need to stick tighter to that resume. We need to look a little bit closer to that resume. Because when you expand this to 12 teams, there's going to be a lot of teams that have 1 loss. There's going to be a lot of teams that have maybe 2 losses. And there might be a 2-loss team that deserves a spot over that 1-loss team. For example, Texas A&M has 2 losses. One's to Alabama in the regular season. The other one's to Alabama in the SEC championship. Does Texas A&M not deserve to go to the college football playoffs if they dominated a number 6 ranked Georgia? If they dominated a number 15 ranked Auburn? If they dominated a number 25 ranked Tennessee? The point is that Texas A&M team would deserve a spot in the college football playoffs if they lost to the number 1 ranked team in Alabama. And how closely did those games in Alabama go? Was it a 45-point blowout, 50-point blowout? Was it a 6-point win by Alabama? That 2-loss team might deserve to go over a 1-loss Big Ten team, for example. If Nebraska has 1 loss and that 1 loss is to an unranked opponent, well then they don't deserve to be in the college football playoffs, even if they won their division, even if they dominated the rest of the year over that Texas A&M team. Because when you expand this thing out, it's going to be there's going to be a lot of chaos, I believe, at first. You're going to have the UCFs of the world who, just because they went undefeated, think they deserve to be in there, and that is not the right criteria. The right criteria is strength of schedule, strength of opponents, and point margin. And strength of opponents also comes with ranked opponent wins. I kind of put those 2 together. Stick to the law. Make sure you have everything worked out. You've talked to everybody. You've talked to John through Sally and Sally back to John. Because this is going to get very dodgy if you don't. And I say this with passion because the college game, especially college football, is so well represented, so cherished, that if you even so slightly damage it, you're going to have a lot of pissed off people. You're going to have a lot of pissed off people. The college football numbers, the viewership is off the charts. So make sure you're handling this thing with care. Make sure you're as honest and as even as possible. Listen, they say they have been very even across the board, ever since this whole ranking system came into play. I believe that there are years that they shade one way or the other. My example with that Alabama team and that Ohio State or Clemson team, I believe it was Clemson at the time. When they moved Clemson to 2, even though Clemson had 2 more ranked wins than that Alabama team did, that's the kind of thing where you have to just straight up say, hey, listen, they have a better strength of schedule so far. They've beaten more ranked opponents. They've beaten them by a larger margin. Boom. That Clemson team is number 1. Alabama's number 2. They've got to just be better on the details. Now let's talk the fun side of it. Expanding to 12 teams would be incredible. Who wouldn't want to see a UCF versus Alabama? Who wouldn't want to see an Oregon versus Georgia? Who wouldn't want to see a Texas A&M versus Oklahoma? Everybody would want to see those games. Expand the playoffs. We have been preaching it for the last several years. Now, I said all that stuff before this because they need to make sure they have everything bolted down and ready to go, so that way when they expand it, we get the maximum entertainment for our dollar. Listen, I understand where, when Oregon's out of the playoffs, I don't just turn off college football. Or when Oregon doesn't have a great season, I've watched every painstaking game Oregon's ever had. Trust me. Through the tears and the pizza rolls and all, I've done it. But I'm just a simple college football fan. Everybody knows I love Oregon. But I will sit down and watch the most random and meaningless games in the entire world because I love college football that much. And I would love to see all the... It would bring, and this is a perfect example, I believe, it would bring the love of March Madness over to college football, which would just blow up college football even more than it already is. What college football and March Madness have in common, it is a one-game winner takes all. There is no best of 7, best of 3. I'll see you next week. There's a loser's bracket. No. This is a winner take all. So you're telling me you wouldn't want to see an all-out war between UCF and Alabama? You wouldn't want to see an all-out war between Georgia and Oklahoma? You wouldn't want to see Clemson versus Oregon? You wouldn't want to see Clemson versus USC? Notre Dame versus USC? Come on. Notre Dame versus USC? This is as classic as it possibly gets now. These are all the possibilities that could happen in the very near future. So take care of the logistics. Make sure you got it ready. And then we are about to have college football skyrocket to the top of every single chart. They'll be the most viewed sport, the most loved sport, the most everything. Because they are going to bring that excitement that March Madness has, that bracket feel that March Madness has, into football. So absolutely, college football should expand in 12 teams. I would love to see 12 teams this year. I hope they voted in this year. There's a lot of fun and interesting matchups. And we as fans deserve it. Those teams deserve it, more importantly. UCF deserved to play Alabama. Instead, they get bounced to a bowl game. It doesn't matter if they win or lose that bowl game. It's the fact that they deserved an opportunity. And expanding this thing will bring opportunity to teams that would never get that opportunity if the playoffs were never there. Schools like Coastal Carolina, who have incredible seasons, they beat ranked opponents, they have a dominant season, deserve the chance, even if it's just a chance, to make the college football playoffs. We know a team like Coastal Carolina could have the greatest season of their entire lives like they did last season, and if there was no playoffs, they would never even be considered for a high bowl game. Teams like Indiana, who have great seasons, Wisconsin's, Ohio State's, Oregon's, USC's, Washington's, teams deserve chances. Schools deserve chances. And the 12-team format with stricter rule watching, and not rule watching, but stricter resume watching is what I was trying to say, and resume following will bring opportunity to teams that are on their best behavior, will bring opportunity to teams that maybe just never get looked at close enough, and this close resume watch and this 12-team playoff will do the trick. I am very excited, and I hope it happens. The UFC 263 event, it is here, it came, it went, it was incredible. We had record octagon time, like 3+ hours of octagon time, meaning that fights were lasting. We were getting decisions. It was a lot of fun. Some great fights. And the return of Nate Diaz. Nick and Nate Diaz rub people the wrong way. Nick and Nate Diaz have mouths on them. Nick and Nate Diaz have been known to cause some, stir some feathers, cause some problems, but there is one thing that will always stand true. Nick and Nate Diaz are superstars, and Nick and Nate Diaz, more importantly, Nate Diaz, will always sell tickets and always be fun to watch. Nate Diaz hasn't stepped in an octagon since 2019, but he comes back, he fights the number 3 ranked guy in the welterweight division in Leon Edwards, a guy who has been dominating as of late, and he takes him all the way to 5 rounds. And if you look at the scorecard, if you looked at the rounds and the stats for the rounds, Leon Edwards looked like he mopped the floor with him, which technically, statistically, he did. And if you looked at the significant strikes, Leon Edwards led in almost every single category. But in the final round, Nate Diaz almost ended Leon Edwards. This is what I love about the Diaz brothers. They're tough as hell. They will take as much damage as possible. There's going to be blood all over them by the time they're done in the ring. And we saw Nate Diaz with a big old gash on his forehead, literally bleeding out of both sides of his head, squirting on all angles. And Nate Diaz still put on a show. Nate Diaz still was taunting him to the very last bell. And Nate Diaz rocked Leon Edwards to the point where Leon Edwards has never been rocked in his entire career. And Nate Diaz 1-2s him in the very last round and almost puts him to sleep. I'm telling you, they've got to get Nate and Nick on the same card. If you put Nate and Nick Diaz fighting guys on the same night, this would be one of the most record-selling cards of all time. That's how much fun they are. That's how much showmen they are. That's what superstar level they can bring. I mean, Leon Edwards, a guy who has never been rocked, the number 3 ranked welterweight in the world, fights an old, washed-up Nate Diaz at 36 years old, and Nate Diaz comes in, and he lost every single round except for the last round, and he almost sleeps him in the last round. And the best part is he 1-2s him, rocks him, and next thing you know, you have Nate Diaz just taunting him, pointing at him, laughing at him while he's beating the hell out of him. Listen, the Diaz brothers are good for the UFC. The Diaz brothers, specifically Nate, I would say. I know Nick Diaz has been a big proponent of been a big part of that, but Nate Diaz seems to be more of the mouthier one. For me, he's the funnier one in his mannerisms and stuff. But they are good for the sport, and they need to get them on the same card. I am pleading with the UFC. Give me the Diaz brothers on the same night that I have a Francis Ngannou, Derek Lewis fight. I don't care. Give me some mega card with both Diaz brothers soon. The Diaz brothers are so much fun to watch. So glad to see Nate get in there. And listen, Nate looked pretty damn good. He didn't look great for the first 4 rounds, but Nate looked pretty damn good in the final round. That's all that matters. We also had a pretty remarkable win. The first ever Mexican-born champion, Brandon Moreno, defeats Figueiredo by submission. Moreno's story has been inspiring all week. Listen, the first ever Mexican-born champion, he could not express how much that meant to him. And he was very emotional in the octagon after the win, as well as I think anybody would be winning a championship over Figueiredo, who was the stronger fighter, the better fighter, but he just got caught on a bad night. He seemed to relax early in the fight, thinking, hey, listen, I'm going to do exactly what I did last time, which is pick him up and slam him down whenever I want, punch him and kick him whenever I want. And Figueiredo in his last fight with Moreno was just dancing with him, kind of playing with him. He would slam him down, he'd get up, he'd take a couple punches, he'd take a couple kicks. He got rocked 1 or 2 times, but it was more so him just being fluid and just kind of relaxing. This time Moreno came out and showed what a true star and true champion he is going, or true champion not only he is, but what a true star he's going to be, I should say. So congratulations to Mexico. It's super cool when Moreno really pours out his heart and soul into that octagon. If I'm the UFC, I'm running this fight back again. Why not? I mean, these two seem to be heads and shoulders above everybody else in the division. So why not run this back for the title fight again? The flyweight division is one of those weird divisions where they've got 2 or 3 guys that are kind of towards the top, and everybody else, there's a very large gap. And Figueiredo and Moreno, are the only 2 that I would run this thing back instantly. There's not many title fights that I would run back. There's not many title fights where I'm like, man, this was a fight that we have to see over and over again. Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor, we've got to see that one again. Best of 3. Well, let's get another one of Moreno and Figueiredo. Because Figueiredo, I believe, is the better fighter. I didn't believe Moreno had any chance at all. Going into it, most people didn't think. Dana White even came out and said Moreno has absolutely zero chance. Zero chance. Figueiredo is just the stronger fighter, the better fighter, more physicality, better striking, and Moreno submitted him, and it was beautiful. So I wanted to give a shout out to Mexico. It's really cool. The first Mexican-born UFC champion. We love seeing how diverse and successful Dana White has made the UFC. I almost said the NBA. But then, of course, let's get to the belle of the ball. Israel Adesanya faces Marvin Vettori, and it happened the exact way I thought it was going to happen. Marvin Vettori is a tank. Marvin Vettori took kicks that I would take one of those kicks, and then I would fall on the ground crying and hold my leg. And he took 16 of them. By the way, if there's one thing you need to learn in the UFC, and I know I have a couple of UFC people that listen to this podcast, learn how to defend the damn front leg kick. If you fight southpaw, you have to learn how to defend that front leg. Because every single time, Conor McGregor didn't learn how. Dustin Poirier chopped it up. Israel Adesanya did nothing but chop into Marvin Vettori's leg. Now, Marvin Vettori took those kicks and still came at it. But there's very few guys that can take those kicks and still stay standing. Nate Diaz was one of those guys as well. Leon Edwards just kicked the same leg the whole night, the same spot, and it bruised up and it swelled after the first round. Learn how to defend the damn kick that just, you know what kick I'm talking about. They just attack the front leg over and over. Learn how to check that. Learn how to read it quicker. And I understand it's very difficult. It's a lot more difficult than I think because you have to watch for the hands and the head movement. I got all that. But if I'm a UFC fighter and I'm looking to win a title fight, I will learn how to defend that one kick. Like, that's exactly what Conor McGregor said. I am learning how to defend this one kick because I was beating him in everything else, which he was. Conor McGregor was outstriking him by a mile. But he could not check that leg kick. But Israel Adesanya is just so far head and shoulders above everybody else in this division. He just keeps, when he moved up in weight, I knew it was going to be very tough for him. And it was very tough for him, and that's why he came back down. Stayed in this middleweight division. Marvin Vettori is no schlub. Marvin Vettori is I would say the second best fighter in that division. It's tough to put anybody else above him right now. He was very solid with Israel Adesanya. It's just the fact that Israel Adesanya is so much better than him, it's unfair. It looked like a sparring session. We've seen very few guys be able to make a real fight look like a sparring session. John Jones, Israel Adesanya, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Anderson Silva. These guys were so great because these guys would make fights look like sparring sessions. That is all Israel Adesanya is doing. Just, it was kick, stay out of danger. Kick, stay out of danger. Marvin Vettori, the second best fighter in this division, looked so far below Israel Adesanya's level, it's unfair. So congratulations to Israel Adesanya. The UFC just keeps putting on great events, by the way. Can we just agree that UFC 263 is just another one of those notches in Dana White's belt this year? It just feels like it gets better and better every single fight. Especially this fight because you got so much bang for your buck. I would say that the next fight to make, though, for Israel Adesanya is running back with Whitaker. Whitaker has looked really good in his last couple fights, and this would be a lot of fun to watch. So definitely that's the next fight to make. But congratulations to Israel Adesanya. You just dominated the entire night. And real quick, before we go, let's get through a little bit of NBA. Just going to give a few of my predictions. Listen, I'm going to predict the Jazz win this in 5. Donovan Mitchell has not been able to be stopped. And what has happened in Game 3, and everybody said that the Clippers were going to win Game 3, and they probably should have won that game. I don't believe the Jazz came out with the intensity that they're used to. I believe the Jazz play with more intensity this upcoming match and win Game 4. And when the Jazz go back to home up 3-1, I think it is a wrap. They might even close it out. I'm going with a gentleman's sweep, 5-1. The Utah Jazz win this series. Now, over the 76ers, I told you last week, after they came back from that giant dominant performance from the Hawks in Game 1 and almost won that game and lost by 4, I knew it was over. The 76ers are going to dominate the rest of the series. The Brooklyn Nets are done if they cannot get Kyrie Irving or James Harden back in the very near future and at 100% or even 80%. We have seen Kevin Durant not be able to carry a team. And I want the same energy from everybody who says that Kevin Durant's the best player in the world or the second best player in the world to give him the hell that he deserves. LeBron James took Matthew Dellavedova. You expected LeBron James to win the championship in 2015 when Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love both went down. So if that's the case, we have got to start holding Kevin Durant to these same standards. Kevin Durant has to have heroic performances in order for this team to even have a shot without Kyrie Irving and James Harden. I don't believe that is going to happen. We have never seen Kevin Durant have the burden of carrying a team by himself. Golden State, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, he didn't have to be the guy. The Oklahoma City Thunder, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, and better yet, they still lost in the championship, so it doesn't even matter, right? Kevin Durant needs to become the guy and put up unworldly numbers of 30, 35 plus in order for this team to have a chance. I don't think that's happening. I think the Nets are going home. The Bucks versus 76ers. Of course, we already know that the Phoenix Suns, I'm going to predict them guys to win. In case you don't know, I'm predicting the team that already won to win. The Phoenix Suns are going to have a fun matchup against the Utah Jazz. We have a finals that we have not seen in a very long time. A finals without LeBron James or Steph Curry. A finals without one of our top two players in the entire world, in either Kevin Durant or LeBron James. So it's one of those things that this year is going to be a lot of fun. I've enjoyed these series already so much. So let's see what happens. Those are my NBA predictions. But that is it. That is the show for you. I appreciate everybody stopping by. If you like us, share us with a friend. Follow us on our social media so you can stay up to date with everything. Listen, if you like us, share us with a friend. I'll say it one more time, because the more you share, the bigger we grow, and the more the Locker Room faithful can stand together. So we appreciate you. I love you guys. I say we because we're all one family, but I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Jacob Courtwright. This is The Locker Room.